Going from a safe atmosphere to one that's potentially dangerous is like preparing to enter another world. It can be a fearful experience. After all, you're not only surrounded by a different atmosphere, but you're also depending on special equipment for your survival against the unknown. And down here, if you're wearing the wrong type of equipment, or if it hasn't been regularly inspected and maintained, you may be going down for the last time. It's the same as entering a hazardous atmosphere where you work. It's literally another world, and you can't take your safety for granted. Because one mistake by ignoring proper maintenance and inspection, or even incorrect selection of equipment, and the price may be your life. Millions of American workers wear respirators on the job every day. Yet thousands suffer severe exposures to airborne hazardous substances each year. These exposures can lead to serious health effects, including lung damage, and other long-term effects such as cancer, heart disease, silicosis, asbestosis, or other chronic illnesses. Since every cell in your body runs on oxygen, your lungs keep you going. Your lungs are incredibly durable, yet vulnerable. The respiratory surface of your lungs opens from 300 square feet at rest to 1,000 square feet when you inhale fully. Air we breathe is 3/4 nitrogen, traces of argon, foreign particles, and 1/5 oxygen. Your cells feed on oxygen, but when you inhale contaminants, you contaminate your respiratory surface. That's why respiratory protection is so important. A respirator can ensure that air which your lungs pull in through your nose and mouth, down through the trachea, and into the two main corridors called bronchi, contains enough oxygen and no lung hazards. Foreign particles such as dust fall out of the air in these large passageways. In the lungs, each bronchus divides into smaller and smaller airways called bronchioli. At the end of the smallest corridors are tiny chambers called alveoli. So small, there are 300 million of them within the lungs. Oxygen passes through the alveolar walls, while other molecules such as nitrogen are usually blocked. When the oxygen passes through the alveolar wall to the bloodstream, red blood cells acting like freight cars unload carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen, which is then delivered to other cells in the body. Carbon dioxide that passes back through the membrane to the lungs is then exhaled by the lungs, thus completing the vital life cycle. To prevent respiratory illnesses and injuries, OSHA updated the general industry respiratory protection standard and applied that update to general industry, construction, shipyard, longshoring, and marine terminal workplaces. This program covers permissible practices to use when you face hazardous atmospheres, respirator types and selection, your employer's written respirator plan, medical evaluation, and fit testing. You will also learn proper respirator maintenance, inspection, decontamination, and storage. Training is a critical part of respirator use. Before you're ever allowed to wear a respirator on the job, you will be trained and retrained at least annually. This training can protect you when you work in hazardous atmospheres. Hazardous atmospheres fall into two basic categories: oxygen deficient or contaminated. When an atmosphere does not contain enough oxygen to sustain breathing, it is considered oxygen deficient. OSHA and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, agree that air is oxygen deficient lower than 19.5% or less by volume at sea level. Confined spaces such as silos, boilers, tanks, ship holds, and sewers are all potentially oxygen deficient. Contaminated atmospheres contain dangerous levels of toxic particles, gases, vapors, fumes, and mists. These contaminants result from work or environmental pollution, some of which can be acidic or alkaline. For example, anhydrous ammonia forms a powerful alkali that damages breathing passages, chemically burns lungs, and can cause long-term lung damage and death. Chlorine can form an acid. It can burn skin and eyes. If swallowed, chlorine can cause acid burns in your mouth, throat, and stomach. Breathing chlorine gas can lead to irritation of the nose and upper respiratory system, intense headaches, violent coughing, dizziness, and vomiting, as well as chest pains and shortness of breath. Inhalation is the quickest way for contaminants to enter your bloodstream. That's why it's so important to protect your respiratory system if you work in a contaminated atmosphere. Employers provide a healthy work environment by developing safe operating procedures or installing engineering controls to reduce atmospheric hazards. However, not all hazards are avoidable. When engineering controls are infeasible or are being installed, you may be required to wear a respirator. The respirator you wear will depend on the type of hazard you face. There are two basic types of respirators: air purifying and supplied air. The air purifying respirator removes contaminants by passing ambient air through the air purifying element, while atmosphere supplying respirators provide fresh air from an uncontaminated external source. Air purifying respirators come in three basic types: particulate removing, vapor and gas removing, or a combination of the two. As you breathe in, air purifying respirators have replaceable filters or air purifying elements to remove solid or liquid hazards from the air. Some contaminants are removed from the air by a canister or cartridge with a filter, sorbent catalyst, or combination of these. Air purifying respirators are approved for use only when the atmosphere contains sufficient oxygen to sustain breathing, contaminant concentration is known, and does not exceed the facepiece limitations. Air purifying respirators may not be used when contaminants are immediately dangerous to life and health, IDLH. An atmosphere is considered IDLH if it poses an immediate threat to life, would cause irreversible adverse health effects, or would impair your ability to escape in an emergency. Remember, an air purifying respirator filters existing air, and for that reason provides no protection from an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. To enter a suspected oxygen-deficient atmosphere, you need a special supplied air respirator. Two common types of supplied air respirators are the self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, and the supplied air respirator, in which the air is sent from an outside source through a hose or air line to your mask or hood. Tight-fitting pressure demand respirators use at least grade D quality breathing air, which is admitted to the facepiece only when a negative pressure is created by inhalation. However, with a hood or helmet, the airline supplies continuous airflow. Supplied air respirators provide a virtually unlimited air supply for work in hazardous atmospheres. Hose length is limited to 300 feet or less and can restrict mobility as well as become crimped or disconnected. The SCBA you may associate with the diving term SCUBA, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Actually, the setup is very similar. Breathing air is provided by tanks worn whenever you work in a hazardous atmosphere. SCBAs provide the highest level of respirator protection and positive pressure. For that reason, SCBAs are more commonly used in rescue or emergency situations. However, the wearer is limited to the amount of air carried in tanks, usually measured in half hours. Positive pressure is an advantage of a pressure demand SCBA, which protects in oxygen-deficient and contaminated atmospheres. Regardless of what type of respirator is prescribed for you, it must be the one which best meets the hazards you face. Selection of the right respirator for the job is documented in your employer's written respiratory protection plan. The plan establishes work site-specific procedures for respirator selection, use, and maintenance. Part of this written plan requires evaluation of respiratory hazards. In evaluating respiratory hazards, your employer estimates employee exposures and identifies contaminant chemical state and physical form. Results of workplace atmospheric sampling, the nature of your work, as well as the time and activities you're expected to perform wearing the respirator are also part of selection criteria. Your employer will appoint a person qualified by training and/or experience to administer, oversee, and evaluate program effectiveness. And the written respiratory protection plan will be made available to you as well. Not everyone can meet the physical demands of wearing a respirator. Even divers go through extensive training despite the advantage of weightlessness in the water. Not everyone has that advantage. Some SCBAs weigh up to 35 pounds and can put extra strain on your heart. Also, wearing a respirator increases physical exertion, which causes a rise in body temperature and can lead to heat stress, blackouts, and dehydration. To avoid incidents such as these, medical screening is required for most respirator users. The medical evaluation ensures that you are physically able to use the equipment. You will fill out a medical questionnaire or receive an initial medical examination before being fit tested or required to use a respirator. Your employer's physician or licensed healthcare professional, PLHCP, will administer the questionnaire and examination in confidence at the time convenient for you. Obviously, wearing an SCBA is more stressful than using another type of respirator. The medical evaluation allows for such differences as well as the worker's age and past respirator experience. Once you're medically approved for respirator use, the next step in the selection process is respirator fit testing. Because tight-fitting facepiece respirators rely on a face-to-mask seal, it is important to select the respirator with the best fit. Stubble, beards, or low hairlines can get between the face and mask and create leaks, since tight fit is impossible. Some people may have to remove facial hair or change hairstyle in order to wear a respirator properly. Glasses or goggles can also interfere with a good fit because temple bars prevent proper seal of the full face mask. Many respirators allow corrective lenses to be mounted inside the facepiece. Fit testing is required before initial use whenever a different facepiece is used, or at least annually. To begin fit testing your respirator, put the unit on and tighten the straps so that they're not over tight. You may have to try on several respirators before you find one that conforms to your facial structure. Two types of fit testing may be required: qualitative and quantitative. In qualitative testing, a challenge agent, vapor, smoke, or aerosol is released around the respirator wearer. If the wearer detects the presence of the challenge agent through odor, taste, or nasal irritation, fit is considered inadequate. Quantitative fit testing measures the actual level of challenge agent both outside and inside the respirator facepiece. Since fit is affected by changes in facial structures such as weight loss and surgery, you may be fit tested annually or more often as required by facial changes. Whenever you move your head or jaw to speak, your face changes shape. This can affect the way your mask fits. To make sure the facepiece maintains a good seal in a variety of positions, part of the test includes moving your head up and down, side to side, and performing deep breathing, regular breathing, talking, and grimacing. In addition, you will perform a user seal check to determine if the respirator is properly sealed to your face each time you don the respirator or adjust the straps. You can use the positive and negative pressure checks or the respirator manufacturer's recommended check. To perform the negative pressure test, place your palms over the inhalation inlets or squeeze the breathing tube. Inhale gently so the facepiece collapses slightly. Hold your breath for about 10 seconds. If the facepiece holds the negative pressure or suction and no leaks are felt, the respirator is considered a good fit. Next, perform the positive pressure test. Block off the exhalation valve with your palm and blow outward gently. If the positive pressure can be maintained inside the mask and no leaks are detected, you have a good fit. Loose-fitting respirators such as hoods, helmets, blouses, or full body suits that completely cover the head do not require such critical fit testing. However, when wearing a tight-fitting face piece or mask respirator, you will conduct a fit check every time you put the unit on. Your life or health could depend upon whether or not the seal is airtight, so don't take unnecessary chances. Proper respirator maintenance ensures that your respirator continues to work at maximum capability. There are 3 basic steps in respirator maintenance: inspection, cleaning, storage. The first step in respirator maintenance is inspection. When inspecting your respirator, check for holes in the filters, loss of elasticity or tears in the head straps and hoses, broken or loose connectors and fittings, missing parts, cracked or scratched face pieces, detergent residue or dirt in the valves, and general cleanliness. The responsibility for inspecting your respirator is yours. Respirators routinely used for non-emergency purposes must be inspected before and after each use. Emergency respirators for escape, rescue, and firefighting are inspected after each use and at least once a month if not in use. Don't accept less than perfect equipment, and don't try do-it-yourself repair jobs unless you are qualified to do so. The next step in respirator maintenance is cleaning. Required steps include removing filters, cartridges, or canisters, disassembling face pieces, discarding defective parts. Next, wash components in warm water with mild detergent and rinse thoroughly. Drain. If the cleaner does not contain a disinfecting agent, your respirator should be immersed for 2 minutes in a disinfectant. Then rinse in clean water and drain. Hand dry components with a clean lint-free cloth or air dry. Reassemble the facepiece, replacing filters, cartridges, and canisters as necessary. Finally, test the respirator to ensure that all components work properly. The final step in maintaining the good working condition of your respirator is storage. After inspection and decontamination, place your respirator in an individual plastic bag. Store masks with the exhalation valve and breathing tubes in a natural, undistorted position. Store respirators where they will be protected from dust, sunlight, heat, cold, moisture, and chemicals. Unprotected units can sustain damage or facepiece distortion. Taking the time to properly inspect, decontaminate, and store your respirator will ensure its continued good service while on the job. In this program, you learned about different types of hazardous atmospheres you may face: contaminated or oxygen deficient, the types of respirators available to protect you from these dangers, the respirator selection process, which involves your employer's written respiratory protection plan, medical evaluation, and respirator fit testing. You've also learned the importance of maintenance, including proper inspection, cleaning, and storage of your respirator. Following these procedures will ensure your continued safety while working with a respirator. Just remember, you can go weeks without food, days without water, but only precious minutes without air. So take the extra time to follow the proper procedures in respirator use and maintenance, and be alert to the dangers around you. Because when you work in a potentially hazardous atmosphere, it's like entering another world, and you can't afford to encounter any surprises like you might in this world.